At this stage, I think over 14,000 Palestinian children have been killed. And you would expect the outrage and the coverage to be proportionately greater, and it's not. In future, people will look back at what is being done, which is essentially the flattening of a whole series of towns and the mass murder of thousands and thousands of unarmed civilians, almost half of whom are children. And they will be absolutely bewildered by how the West allowed this to happen under its very noses with weapons that were being supplied by the West. There is a rupture in the relationship of large numbers of people with the political media class. There is a fundamental alienation that is going on right now as a result of what is happening in the Gaza Strip. I think that's very dangerous for the future. The events of October the 7th are a case study in how traditional media can let us down and how we desperately need alternative voices that will genuinely probe these things and not simply accept the narratives that are fed to them. For this reason, I think it's enormously important to have outlets like Double Down News, and I would urge you to support Double Down News in any way you can.
Solid reporting. If you have not seen, there's a whole hour-long documentary
earlier, but it's really good. Yeah.
October 7th, and it's worth watching, especially if you watched like the propaganda film that Rabbi Schmy and Rabbi Barklay were trying to like push on Candace Owens. Like if you had to sit through that, you should sit through the other side, and then you can weigh and adjudicate. I did bring out, let's see, split. I brought out the dictionary. This is 2005 Oxford English Dictionary. I wanted to look up, they use this word all the time, anti-Semitism. Bassam Youssef was using it. And it simply reads, hostility to or prejudice against Jews. It doesn't say anything about opposing Israel. It doesn't say anything about opposing apartheid, ethnic cleansing, genocide, any of that sort of stuff.
Let's not forget about what Rabbi Barklay said. It's whatever their feelings are. And that's based on some some professor in the 90s. I don't know if he was also a rabbi.
Yeah, Lord, what's his name?
Yeah, he has a wiki.
Referred to him like 10 times. Yeah, not important. Lord Strauss or Lord Sachs. Lord Sachs. Probably maybe of Goldman Sachs. I don't want to make any assumptions how those families got together. But there it is. It's in the English dictionary here, in English, anti-Semitism. So it neglects, like if you were to go to the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica and look up a Semite, it shows a picture of an Arab, like it's an Arab, right? Semitic languages. So technically Semites, you have to speak a Semitic language. It's not a bloodline. It's not a religion. It's not a DNA thing. It's like you have to be able to speak a Semitic language, of which there were many. There was Aramaic and, Hebrew and other languages that fell into.
So originally, like pre-19th century, that's true, but it changed somewhere, in the late 19th, early 20th century, and been accepted since then as being specifically anti-Jewish, probably in correlation with the pogroms that took place. And I'll have to look up the individual that's associated with that change.
But it's not anti-Zionist.
But it. So the point, right? It's not anti-Zionist now. So, ever since it's been like originally, it had to do with anyone that's anti those who's of the Semitic language tree, if you will. But then it reformed itself in the late 19th century, late 20th century. I forget the name of the person. It'll come to me in a minute. But to be this anti-Jewish, this in association with the pogroms and what's going on in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, he coined the phrase.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And associated with, that's specifically the Jewish population. Then it took on new life with the Holocaust and the tragedy that took place during World War II.
Well, we'll get to exaggeration of atrocity stories coverage in a second. But I did want to point out, I also went through the trouble to look up blood libel, because that's been used a lot lately in conjunction with the anti-Semitism. A lot of things, claimed about October 7th not being true. If you pointed out, it's been pointed out by Ben Shapiro and Rabbi Barklay and others that's alleged blood libel. Rabbi Schmy, big blood libel. If you search his Twitter, you can find lots of uses of that phrase. I did not find it in the dictionary. So blood relation, blood poisoning, blood money, bloodletting. I mean, it should be somewhere around here. Am I not using the dictionary right, Tony? Blood.
No, that would That's the
maybe you have to put the two words together. The red, like we put the definition of blood together with the definition of libel, or is that not allowed to? It's not how you do it. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is also during that clip, and we'll get to atrocity stories now in question, but first I want to pick up on the training exercises, Tony. Like they saw it all going down and they just assumed it was training exercises. You know, some people say that 10/7 was Israel's 9/11, but, you know, it's been observed by comedians who are smarter than me that you can't have two. And there happen to be a lot of training exercises the morning of 9/11 that involve neocons who take their strategy from where? Where did the neocons take their strategy? Let's see. Leo Strauss and the Likud Party and Irving Kristol and a bunch of people who go back to Trotskyites and, infiltrators of our government.
University of Chicago. Yeah, the cesspool.
University of Chicago is Rockefeller.
Yep. And in there, they're sort of teaching this. He had a very warped idea of the Plato's Republic and the way to create noble lies and instantiate their vision of a new world, if you will. And he certainly taught, I don't know how many different members that make up now what we call those who the PNAC people. But
yes, this is them, the conservative neocons.
Neocons. Thank you. That's what I'm looking for. The neocons. Yes, exactly.
So it's a simple climb up the ladder, right? The neocon party.
Neocons and the Likuds are like the same thing. It's just the U.S. version of the Likud party later on.
Right.
Later. It basically came into power at the same time. You think about it. Likud starts around 96.
Likud starts in 77.
Well, it starts in 77, but it gains like significant power.
In our White House, when H.W. Bush is in there. So it starts in the late 80s, early 90s, and then builds up to Irving Kristol and the rest of those guys writing the PNAC project at the end of the century, right? But Leo Strauss has an interesting history, right? It's tying back to Trotskyism and solipsism and socialism. But wait, if you go back to the neocons and you click Likud Party, what do they connect to?
Been in power since the 70s.
Their major influencer was Vladimir Jabotinsky back in the 20s, like that set this whole tone for we'll take their land. And who started that? Who was his handler? Oh, people from Cecil Rhodes's Round Table and the British Empire. How the British imperialists created the fascist Jabotinsky. So that's just reading, a little light homework for people going around. But I also wanted to foreshadow the next clip coming up with this book. Let me get rid of this dictionary here. This book right here, The General's Son. This is the general. His name is Matthew Peled. This is Miko Peled. He's going to be featured in the next clip, and it's going to be brought to you by Roger Waters. So, atrocities being exaggerated have happened, and there are documentation in here from the experiences of Miko Peled about the types of crimes that were claimed on 10/7 and blamed on Hamas can be credited to Haganah, Irgun, IDF, these sort of agencies. And if you wanted to check it out, it's page 235, talking about the Nakba of 1948. And Rafah was also a refugee camp way back then. How about that? So it's not just like they're going to go and invade it today. They've been messing with this territory for a long time. So I put that all in context for you because I watched this video that you're about to see, Palestine, House of Freedom. And I was like, why is Roger Waters barefoot and drinking coffee and telling me about this? But I paid attention to it, and it was actually quite witty. And I could see why he would want to read it and put it into the world. This is a project that he's doing with Miko Peled, the author of this book, The General's Son. So now that you have that context, you could better understand the purposeful irony that they're trying to create in Washington, D.C. This is like, remember how Banksy had that hotel in behind the wall, right? Mm-hmm. This is the same sort of thing, but this is going to be in Washington, D.C. And I'm sure it's going to probably cause a stir just because of what's in this video. So, and then right after that, I mentioned that Germany jumped the shark. A couple weeks ago, Owen Jones was in an argument on TV against the pro-Zionist, and he had made the statement that Germany is backing Israel because of their guilt over the Holocaust, and that they're like, no, that's not going on. Now he's not only had the receipts, but Germany went out and said, in case you need a video current present day reference on this thing. It's like showing the newspaper with the hostage, like here's proof of life. They did it in front of all the cameras at a Palestine protest, and they betrayed a bunch of people who should have had their right to speak. And if what they're saying is untrue, how threatening can it be to people with logic and reason? Do we need to punish dissenting views if what they're saying there's no merit? Won't we all just move on with our day? Why you got to be so harsh to people? So that'd be a question you might ask at any given point in any of these episodes.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come on.